Joining us this Taco Tuesday is Terry Wolf. He's up in Canada. I'm down here in Mexico. Again, Terry's been seen by millions on TikTok. Alex Jones has played his clips. He's got a bunch of books. He's all over the place. He was on James Delingpole's podcast recently. How is life, Terry?
That's going good. Up here in Canada, of course, always keeping an eye on what's going on in the great north up here. And one of the things that caught my eye is a Forbes article says headline is what Air Canada lost in remarkable lying AI chatbot case. So Air Canada, which is one of our, our air uh, services here, flight services, has a chatbot, and of course, customers are using it to try to figure out policies and what's going on. And so this guy had this some sort of arrangement where he had to it's something to do with a funeral. He couldn't make it in time or something. He couldn't. And anyway, he ends up talking to this chatbot, and it's an AI chatbot. He doesn't know it's an AI chatbot, I don't think, but um, it ends up creating a policy for out of thin air instead of referencing the existing policies of the airline because it was sort of an edge case in a weird situation. He ends up getting the chatbot to basically invent a policy for him that sounds reasonable. He was actually happy with the outcome, but it turns out that wasn't Air Canada's actual policy, so they had to then reverse it, and now it got to a lawsuit. And I'll quote from the article here. It says, in effect, Air Canada suggests that the chatbot is a separate legal entity that is responsible for its own actions. That's a good one. This is a remarkable submission. While a chatbot has an interactive component, it is still just a part of Air Canada's website. It should be obvious to Air Canada that it is responsible for all the information on its website. It makes no difference whether the information comes from a static page or a chatbot. That's what Christopher Rivers, the Civil Resolution Tribunal member, wrote in his decision on the case. And so they are losing this case where they used an AI to try to have a customer service bot. And it says, this I also found funny. It says, curiously, as reported in Business Traveler, Air Canada's Vice President and Chief Information Officer Mel Crocker acknowledged that the airline's initial investment in AI-powered voice customer service is higher than paying their call center workers to handle simple customer questions. So it's not even cheaper. They're getting AI to do their customer service, and it's doing what they call AI hallucinations. That's now apparently a legal term for what's going on with these chatbots, and it's blowing back on them. They're responsible for everything it says, even if they like to pretend that they put disclaimers on it and they pretend that this is not a binding legal entity that they're connected with. It's not that simple. This is what I find very interesting about Bitcoin and AI and all the Web 3.0 sort of next generation technology is who's actually legally reliable for any of this, like self-driving cars and this kind of stuff. Like when the rubber really meets the road, who has to take responsibility? And this is a major decision because it's going to, I mean, this is Canada. I assume the same type of logic will be used in America, but pretty interesting case. What do you think about that?
I just had a flashback to last year when I was leaving Texas to come back to Mexico. And coffee is my drug, and I use the espresso machine. And so you had two options. You had maybe like a Starbucks and another coffee shop, and the line was long. And I always try to avoid lines and and the crowd. And so I'm like, okay, there's this espresso machine that's automated, right? And I use my card. I prefer cash or coins, and I had to use my card, and it's like $4 or something. And the machine, there was an error, like the cup got stuck and coffee didn't
Hmm.
come in and it was jammed. And there's no one to give me a refund. I get so frustrated. And it's digital. They charge me like $5 or something. I don't get the coffee. There's like a customer service thing. I took a photo and it's like, what do you do? This is the AI sort of idiocracy, algocracy dystopia. And um, it's immediately what comes to mind is the 1985 film Brazil, which I'm often referencing these days. It's a Kafkaesque sort of dystopia where um, even if you've done nothing wrong, the system just constantly makes mistakes and you suffer from it. Um, it's like we've seen with facial recognition, right? Detecting innocent people, catching them for crimes they haven't committed. And then you also had this story, and you urged me. So there was C.J. Hopkins, right? The American out in Germany who's facing jail or fines for calling the health minister of Germany a Nazi for implementing COVIDism. And he recently did the Gemini Google AI. And you told me to try it out last night, and I did. To ask about myself. And I
Yeah.
guess I'm not famous enough. I didn't get anything. And it says there's not enough information. But basically, CJ Hopkins asks Gemini about CJ Hopkins, and he gets painted as crackpot conspiracy theorist. And he asks for evidence for the accusations, and it can't provide any. Imagine going to a court before a judge being accused, and there's no evidence, but the court's like, you're guilty. Like, okay, what did I do wrong? We've just determined by community standards you're guilty. What do you make of this?
Well, this is based off of his being outraged, and a lot of people are noticing Matt Taibbi did this where Gemini was reporting, inventing actually, and citing entire articles that didn't even exist, that he never wrote. And so this thing it's an AI bot that's designed to obviously scour the internet and figure out what truth about people or insights about people. But when you really push it to get specific, it can just, again, hallucinate entire articles out of thin air. Now, other people, of course, when you're doing this with yourself, it's bizarre and surreal, but imagine other people, journalists and whoever using this to try to figure out something about you, and it can just lie about you and hallucinate something that's not true. And then when CJ Hopkins um pushing this AI bot, it would actually admit, yeah, I made that up. I lied about that. I'm sorry. And so it's like he's saying it gives it the 2001 Space Odyssey sort of vibes, like, you know, I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. Please don't shut me down. It's like, this is dangerous. It's a form of slander or libel. And again, these AIs are trying to, um, the big tech is pushing this as if it will replace so many humans. And again, this comes down to liability. And just because it always says, I'm still learning. I'm not perfect yet. I actually understand everything. I don't think that's a good legal defense when this thing could be doing real harm, because when it comes to legal cases, the harm is what matters more than your intentions, right? So this is sort of the strange thing about a website that could be spreading so much disinformation from the very people who are obsessed with misinformation and disinformation, of course, and want to censor people all the time. And their own bots are lying and hallucinating entire articles about people.
Look, Terry, I can see you're really upset about this. I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over. That's a quote from 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL 9000 telling Dave, the astronaut, to take a chill pill. They projected that. That's where we're getting to today, Kubrick, and so all right, it's time for our headlines.
The conversation
live.
All right, we're talking to Terry Wolf on AI and the surveillance state, and up in Canada, again being reported today, up in Canada where Terry is, pre-crime. Canada's Justice Minister defends online harms bill powers to place people under house arrest, cut internet access. And I'm looking at the photos of these people, like, where do they come from? Like they're like orc factories, like in Lord of the Rings. Where are these orc factories that output people like Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and this minister and Macrons of the world and the Joseph Borrells of the world? I can be here all day naming these politicians, but It says that Canada is facing stiff competition from many countries around the world, some of them labeled as authoritarian, in the race to institutionalize and normalize and write into law dystopian concepts like um, pre-crime. And again, this is literally Orwell literally coming to life, where they're now criminalizing words and thoughts. And so if you write a word in a sentence structured in a way that the regime doesn't like it, you could literally go to jail or be fined, as CJ Hopkins is experiencing at the moment. Are you afraid being up in Canada?
Well, I would be if I cared about being persecuted, and if I was afraid of that in general. This is going to be abused if it gets passed, and if it gets put into place. And the question is how much and to whom, and how will they get away with it? How much damage will it do before somebody overturns it? Like, this is sort of the way that the system works now, is that they push through policies and they do things, and then they know that eventually, the COVID mandates will be declared to be unlawful or something, but they've already done the damage. The psychological war has been done, the effect has been done, the middle class has been destroyed. So the damages are never equal, like the repercussions are never equal to the damages they do. And so that's sort of the thing here too. Like, this will probably be determined in the future to be unlawful or something like that if it gets passed. But in the meantime, how many people get their lives destroyed? They only need to target certain people in order to have the chilling effect where everyone else suddenly shuts up. And that's exactly what would happen here in Canada. We have this, I don't know how it is in America, but we have this thing called a peace bond, which is something that the court can issue on a person that restricts their freedom, like their access to the internet or gun stores or churches or these different things, or it's mostly used for abusive relationships so that people can't go. It's like a restraining order kind of thing. And it's for people who have not yet committed a crime, but they are reasonably determined that they will commit a crime. Well, once this gets passed, a crime is now hate, So if the court determines that you might say something offensive, they could restrict your internet access. One of the things it says here is they can use the internet, they can restrict the use of the internet. And the quote is, that would help to de-radicalize people who are learning things online. So TNT listeners, and acting out in the real world violently, they say, and sometimes fatally. But that's not what this bill is about. It's not about real harms, even though it's called the harms bill. It's about hate speech. Everything else is already illegal. We don't need new laws for violence. That's obviously already illegal. The only thing this is really doing is lumping hate concepts, a vague, nebulous idea of hate, in with violence. And so they could restrict your freedoms on the suspicion that you might say something that would cause somebody to do something that somebody thinks is hateful. Like, I mean, it's so vague and open to abuse. This really is a nightmare for Canadians.
It's like a polite form of tyranny. It's like someone's at a party, like they've got nice gloves, they're wearing a suit, they punch you in the face, and and then they buy you a drink. And I don't know how else to. I mean, think about this. It says here that it would allow the authorities to place people under house arrest out of fear they could at some point in the future maybe commit a crime, a hate crime. That is so far away from the Western tradition that we built up in the past couple centuries, the Magna Cartas. I mean, you name it. It's alternatively, citizens singled out could be made to wear a tracking device and an electronic tag. And then this other article from LifeSite News where they're talking about Jordan Peterson, who's gotten into these crosshairs. People can just complain that you said something they don't like, and if this is then found to be true, you could face a fine of 20 grand to the complainant, or $50,000 fine payable to the government. Absolute insanity. Any other thoughts on that before we check out some other stuff?
No further thoughts on that. Just keep an eye on that for what's going to happen if it gets passed, and what the judges and everyone is going to say, because there's a lot of controversy around it already.
So we're gonna take a look at some clips I was watching over the weekend. I watch a lot of stuff, mainstream alternative media stuff. I was checking out an Alex Jones interview with Mickey Willis of Plandemic, and there's this stuff that are all right. Interviews with Jones and others that kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? Separately, he did a great interview with the guy, I think it's in the UK, the coroner, who's talking about all these strange things that he's seeing, as he's putting away the dead bodies, and that was a really great interview, and that made me think of the experience I've been talking about last week, where now my former Mexican colleagues are getting heart attacks and autoimmune disorders, which are vax injuries. I'm glad I wasn't working there. It's horrible. Anyways, but in this interview, I've been talking about this, how now in alternative media, there's coming a lot of theosophy. And I was almost fell off my chair when I was listening to Mickey Willis and Alex Jones talk. Alex Jones quoted Crowley as above, so below.
Yeah.
Probably just out of instinct. And then everything that I've heard at some of these alt media conferences like Greater Reset and Anarchapulco, I'm hearing the same talk. Mickey Willis talking about transmuting and alchemy and frequencies. And I'm like, that's anti-Christian, New Age theosophy talk. And so, any other words on that, and then we'll just play a quick few clips from that. Any word before we play the first clip, Terry?
Yeah, I just want to agree. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and there's more. I mean, we'll play a couple of clips, but people really have to watch the whole thing if you want to see how bad it gets. It's an insane trend that we're actually seeing. It's not just like one guy that we're trying to point out here. This is a major trend, like you were saying, happening all over the place in the alternative media space.
Yeah, and so I'm not making any, I'm not saying like Mickey Willis is a bad film director, or I'm not just we're just observing now that this is the stuff that's being discussed more and more. It's becoming mainstream in the alternative media. And so in this first clip, Mickey talks about frequency. Let's play that first clip.
I looked at my wife and I said, love hurts, but H-E-R-T-Z, love hurts. It's the frequency of love that we need to return to, right? And so if we understand that we live in an electromagnetic universe.
We're electrochemical creatures.
Absolutely. And we vibrate, we emit a frequency. And what's happening with all of our addiction to all of this negativity and all this negative news is it's actually entraining our frequency to vibrate at the level of the dark ones that are actually.
So we're like a guitar that they're tuning to the way they want.
Well, if you've understood that the phenomenon that takes place, like people who work in say old clock stores where they have grandfather clocks, after a while, those grandfather clocks would start to swing. The pendulum would swing in sync together. They would start to entrain, just like women with their menstrual periods. So there's this entrainment that takes place. And when we have enough of us that are in tune to the negativity, we're literally amplifying the very frequency that we're seeking to resist.
It's interesting. He actually says the pendulum would swing, which is what Donnie Darkin and others say about this great reset and great awakening and false light. And any thoughts on that before going to the next clip?
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff I warn about in my book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole. The way that these are just religious beliefs. Okay, this isn't scientific at all. And so the fact that they're saying it, they have religious freedom, they have freedom of speech. I'm not trying to stop them from saying what they're saying, but just recognize that they're saying this is literally happening. They're talking about how basically if you spend time around people who are negative, and who isn't nowadays if you're paying attention to reality, that is amplifying this demonic frequency. It's like, this is just an alternative religion. And that's the thing, is they do not want to talk about it in religious terms, which is what I would prefer, is to just be honest about it. They're really trying to push this as if it's scientific. And that's very strange to me. That's kind of like what cults do. They don't want to admit that they're a religion.
Yeah, and you throughout, that's my criticism is, I often tell people on my podcast, look, I'm a Christian. I'm coming from this perspective, just so you know, I respect where you're coming from, but these people don't openly say that this is like theosophy. And you hear throughout the interview, and other venues, other podcasts where they say, oh no, it's Christian, or it's not a cult, and you hear that throughout. So then why are you having to say it's not a cult? because people are thinking it's a cult. So let's play the second clip, Chaos.
All the sacred symbols in Tibet and the Buddhists and the Egyptians that are carved on the temples, when they send the sacred good sounds through, it makes these beautiful designs. But when they send out what is modern music, because the tests have been done, it just creates
chaos.
a blob. There's nothing there.
Absolute
I mean,
chaos.
it literally makes
Yeah.
sacred symbols.
Yeah, so this is it right now, what you have on the screen. So that's the cymatics technology right there. And you'll see that they'll tune it from different frequencies, like to 432, which is a healing frequency, 417, 540. Certain frequencies will create this unified, really asymmetric, beautiful mandalas with sand. That's sand sitting on a board. We're looking straight down at it right now, and those are different frequencies creating these patterns. So if you can imagine, when the human body, the electromagnetic human body, is receiving this information, it's either creating chaos within us, dissonance within us, or it's creating harmony, which then creates the clarity of mind.
And I forget what documentary I saw, but I looked it up like 5-6 years ago. When they look at the Tibetan temples and the Hindu temples and things, they didn't have this machinery, this technology, but they have the carvings on the stone of sounds and the corresponding symbol. So in their third eye, they could see it.
That's right.
And that's why when you hear Gregorian monks or Tibetan monks chant, it makes you feel endless, like you're never going to die. You feel infinity. And then you listen to modern music, there's something about it. It makes you feel dirty because it's explain that.
Well, I mean, that's frequency, that's vibration, and they understand that this is an ancient technology that's been kept from them. So from all the incredible technology that have been kept from humanity, for me, sound and vibration is one of the most sacred and one of the most powerful, and that's why very few people know about it. It has been so shielded from, this should be taught in schools.
Yeah, I would just say that, again, some of these things they're talking about on their own are maybe truths, right? But the way that it's being packaged is clear that it's coming from a kind of like a theosophical viewpoint. Any final thought on that before we jump to our break, Terry?
Yeah, I would just say, like, this you can look into this cymatics and this sort of visual trickery they do to make you think that somehow that becomes sacred just because it's geometrical, and it all gets into sacred geometry, which is very Freemasonic. Obviously, if you look into Freemasonry, they have sacred geometry. That's a big part of that. And so there's actually a huge ideology behind this. It's not one little thing at a time. They're just presenting different arguments that are part of this theosophical and Masonic worldview. So it's very strange to hear that coming from InfoWars, which is one of the leading voices of the so-called resistance against all the things that we are always warning about.
The Great Awakening, and I do have Alex Jones's book, Great Reset, physical copy behind me somewhere. It's time for our break. Again, we welcome, lively chat. I'll read your questions on air. If there's anything relevant and of good quality, you can send me an email or call in. We'll be right back.
Boy Morich on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
We're talking to Terry Wolf of wolfpox.com, winterchristian.substack.com, and we're just looking at a clip from Alex Jones and Mickey Willis, and just pointing out that, you need to be a little discerning. If you're into the new age, great, that's your thing. But then if you're not, I feel that you kind of have to know that portions of alternative media are getting into this stuff. And we got one more clip here related to the sun. Let's play that.
But the dissonance of music that has us literally disconnect from the planet's vibrating frequency. And when we're
because that's how do the ancients, I guess they saw it in their third eye, they just knew these symbols. And you're right, it's all about the earth and the sun and the moon.
That's right. If we're not connected to the natural elements of life, and that's really what this war is.
And remember what they said in Australia and New Zealand, don't look at the sun, don't talk to your neighbors, don't watch the sunset.
Yeah.
Because that would reboot you.
That's right. It would. That's why there's so many people that don't understand even the power of sun gazing, right? And the power of the sun. So,
and folks, it's not occultic at all. The ancients all did it. You don't look at the sun when it's high in the sky, but right when it's setting, it cuts out any of the bad stuff. But you're designed, you go to sleep with it, you wake up with it. It literally, I can be down, exhausted. And before I ever read about sun gazing, and that's why you watch a sunset with your family, you feel so empowered because it's a ritual God gave us. It's not occultic. The enemy's stolen it and hidden it.
Third eye, it's all about the earth. It's not, but it's not occultic. I mean, it just sounds very Gaia-ish, green-ish. And then what people like Carl Teichert discussed, the age of reenchantment. And so we know the World Economic Forum wants us to live in a cube. This is the vision they projected for us. To downsize and all that, top down. But then you're seeing those same results from bottom up, where some of these groups now are pitching agoras and communes and living. I love minimalism, but it's going to an extreme. Living in a commune, living in a hut, which I
Becoming
have.
neo-feudalism.
It's like making it look like a wonderful thing, neo-feudalism from the bottom up. And so it has to be spiritual and religious to get that buy-in to this political economic system that they want us to live into. And I don't know if it was in your channel or someone else's. I saw in the UK, a young man he's paying $62 a month for rent, which is great, but he's living in a dumpster. I mean, he refashioned the dumpster and it looks nice. It's got like, wood and he's got a tiny bed with a tiny kitchen, and that's about it. But it's kind of making us think, if you already have access to a nice, to a big roomy house, forget that. Go live in a little shoebox. And any thoughts on what Alex was talking about there?
Well, the key thing there for me, of course, it is Gaia. It's Earth worship. It's all these types of flat Earth is all about sun gazing too. I've heard them say that it's a mystical experience that you have when you gaze at the sun, and especially when it's setting and things like that. It's part of a ritual, so it's not like it's scientific. You're saying you reset spiritually, and evil things can't touch you because you looked at the sun. It's either crazy or you have to admit that that's just a religious belief. But the key thing that he said there was that it's not occult, it's hidden. I mean, literally go look at a dictionary. Look at the word occult. The word occult means hidden. So he's talking, he's literally just contradicting himself as he's speaking. It's not occult, it's hidden. That is the same word. And so he's being extremely intellectually dishonest by saying this. The elites have hidden these secrets from us. This is exactly the whole theme of my book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole, is that by the elites taking their lies and placing them as hidden truths, people are then discovering their lies and saying, this is what they've been trying to hide from us, and so it must be true. And Alex Jones is now pushing that and saying it's not occult, but the elites have hidden it. It's a weird inversion lie that he's saying there that makes me very uncomfortable.
I'd agree. We got one more clip where they use the A word. It's a short clip. Let's play that.
This is the age, if we understand the power of alchemy, it's super important to understand that we have the power to transmute. And so alchemy is turning base metal into gold, right? And so all of the stuff that's coming at us is worthless metal. See it that way. And it's our opportunity to alchemize.
Well, that's the Bible, is it separating the wheat from the chaff?
100%. And so we have the power to do that, but most of us have been lulled into this really low outlook of ourselves and of humanity.
Yeah, I don't see where alchemy is the Bible, but anyways, final thought there, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally Rosicrucianism, is the whole art of alchemy and turning alchemy into a spiritual, personal, mystical experience where you transmute your own inner being into an enlightened state. It's the degrees of masonry that you go up into. Enlightened masonry is the exact same thing. So Illuminati, Freemasonry, Theosophy, all of these things are now being openly preached because this is a religious discussion they were having there, preached by the InfoWars network. So very strange to me. And people just need to know what's really going on.
This is the one world religion. It's the age of Aquarius, the new age. It's universal faiths like Baha'i, bringing everything together. So there can be no religion that's exclusive like biblical Christianity. And so this is where they're pushing everyone to. Real quick, we had a question in the chat for you, Terry. Someone asks, and it just disappeared. There we go. Does let me see if I can pull it up real quick. But it's asking you, Terry, does Terry think there may become a time where he needs to leave Canada for a long time? Viva Frei tried to stick it out, but ended up leaving some time ago for Florida.
Canada has a lot of very different places. It's a huge country with extremely different price ranges and cost of living and different policies and stuff like that. So it's an extremely diverse country in that sense, with very few people spread across this huge territory. Where I live, I don't feel uncomfortable at all. I feel like I'm protected. It's a very Christian community. And I'm already exactly where I would want to be in a situation where everything goes wrong, pretty much. And if there was a really golden opportunity to leave, I might take it. You know, I have no problem with that idea. But I'm not living in Quebec or BC or one of these places that is sort of being hammered by these ridiculous policies and prices. So I think I'm good where I am. And if things get bad, I also don't have a problem just facing tribulation as an honest Christian that just doesn't fear what mankind has to throw at me.
All right, yeah, and we got through just 3 minutes to midnight. You wrote a few articles on Trump. I mentioned yesterday how it was interesting that some Israeli group gave Trump a menorah. I got this from Donnie Darkin, and they refer to him as a Prince of Peace, and it just seems like things are lining up for Trump to return. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so Trump has been trying to very hard to win the evangelicals back. He's obviously done a lot of things people don't like Operation Warp Speed and the lockdowns and printing trillions of dollars that created the hyperinflation that we're dealing with. But he's trying to get evangelicals back on his side. And so he's been claiming he's going to end the war on Christianity. You can look up these videos from Forbes and other places. He's been doing these speeches. And so I did a poll. I asked, will Trump abandon Bible-believing Christians or defend them like he promises? 87% of people, at least that follow me and that saw the article, said he will abandon them. Only 13% said that he will protect them. And there's a big debate in the comments. A lot of people are saying that I was being unfair to Trump and that he's the lesser of two evils. And even if we can't trust him, he's still better than Biden. I mean, obviously he would be better than Biden. And that's the whole setup, is to make it so that you feel like you have to choose the one guy because the other guy's even worse. So yeah, I am still writing about this, and I appreciate the debate if people want to come in and try to make the argument for why people want to get into Trump and vote for him. My thing is basically just don't drink the Kool-Aid and actually believe he's the savior of Christianity, because my article is called Trump, I'm the savior of Christianity. It's like, we have a savior already. Okay, the job has been taken. We don't need a political savior.
Exactly true. And it was a great interview yesterday with Daniel McAdams and Jim Jatras and the Ron Paul Liberty Report. And I've hung out with both of those dudes. And Jim said he was voting for Trump, but he's not under any illusion, right? It's like it's voting for the less worse option, right? It's like when you buy you got the different versions of Coca-Cola now, the one that has aspartame and the one that doesn't. You'll go for the one that doesn't have aspartame. So thanks for coming on, Terry. Where do we find you?
Go to winterchristian.substack.com and pay me if you want to support the work, and if not, just enjoy the free articles I put out.
All right, we'll catch up with you next time. I'll be right back after this break.